December the 11th. Thought we had a football season still going. Maybe we still do. We'll find that out on Monday. But Brian Neubert, Tom Dienhart joined me. I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X, on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. And they've got some, today is a day in West Lafayette. You could sit outside. It's almost 60 degrees, and they've got the tents up. They've got some spaced indoor seating. They're doing the best they can to obviously carry out a Triple X as well, dealing with making this all work for this winter. And of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com, and Hilton Garden Inn when tomorrow's a big day, stayed HDI tonight. All right, I'm going to start with you, Tom. Obviously, no football tomorrow. Purdue, 100 consecutive years of the Purdue-Indiana rivalry. What is it? 90 would have been the 95th consecutive Old Oaken bucket game. Not going to happen tomorrow. Take some getting used to that thought process that the Purdue is not going to face Indiana tomorrow.
Yeah, they played every year since 1920. Played for the bucket every year since 1925. So that's a long time, as you guys obviously know and listeners know. Just another casualty of this crazy COVID-19 2020 season, guys. And like you alluded to on the open, Alan, the question now is, has Purdue played its last game? And like you said, well, maybe find out Sunday or Monday at the latest, I would think, to see what Purdue's roster looks like, if they're still in I guess a pause mode or not, guys. I guess if I were a betting man, I think the odds would be long that we see Purdue play another game. But again, we'll wait and see what happens. Just sad to see this rivalry not be continued this year, and would have given Purdue a chance to maybe A, pull a big upset, obviously, and B, end their 4-game losing streak. So we'll just have to wait and see what's next for the Boilers.
Yeah, Brian, when you put the wrap on this season, and we haven't done that just yet, is it as simple? And there's no simple way to it, I guess. But you look at the Minnesota game and the one play that didn't work out, and things kind of turned on a dime at that point. Now Purdue had lost to Northwestern, but is it as simple to say you make that play and you feel a heck of a lot different about where Purdue football is? I mean, we don't know how Rutgers and Nebraska would have turned out, but that certainly changed the way that this 2020 season looked to play it up in Minneapolis.
It's possible, but I mean, it also started at halftime at Illinois. I mean, that second half in Champaign wasn't exactly a thing of beauty either. And then, who knows, you have the weekend off the next week when the Wisconsin game gets canceled. There's just no telling. Mm-hmm. But, obviously, Purdue put itself in a tough position in Minnesota by not playing terribly well, but still very easily could have won that game. And the fact that it got that taken away from it by a bad call by a referee, could have affected them for all we know. If so, what does that say about Purdue's mental toughness and wherewithal and, things like that? It's not pretty. But Purdue just couldn't win the last month or so. And something is really missing. And something was really amiss, I think, probably behind closed doors in terms of where this team's head is, the relationship between coaching staff and players, just kind of reading into Jeff Brom's words, the way he's talked the last couple weeks, it seems like there are some real red flags there. And to be honest with you, the way things are going right now, Purdue seems to need a little bit of a reboot. They seem to need another cultural reboot here. They need everybody on the same page. They need a team that, is going to show that they really, really, really want to win the way the 2017 team did after they had lost for so long. And, perhaps with the way things are going, this season ending prematurely might, practically speaking, might not be the worst thing in the world. I know everybody wants to play, but I think that Purdue, being where Purdue is right now, this might not be the worst thing in the world right now. I mentioned in a different context, last year, the basketball team at the end of a disappointing season was saved the indignity of not missing the NCAA tournament. And what that did was that eternalized all things forever having been possible. And
yeah.
Now, at least if you go into the offseason, Purdue can always say, hey, we still could have turned it around. Who knows? But whether that would have happened or not, we have no idea. But obviously, Purdue's season went off the rails several weeks ago. They were good enough to win, but they weren't good enough to win. And they have to get to the bottom of that here starting as soon as the season ends, whether that's right now or 2 weeks from now.
Tom, I looked at sneak peek at who's the opener next year? And it's Oregon State.
Oregon
September
State
4th.
in West Lafayette.
Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember the only other time Purdue's played Oregon State. One of the big upsets in Purdue football history on the negative side is Purdue lost to the Beavers back in 1967 when Purdue was ranked number 2 and lost to Oregon State. All right, so I buy, and not that Brian's saying, oh, pack it in, but reboot is a good thing. You've got, hopefully, we don't know, but you may have spring ball. You just need a reset right now. Maybe the defense needs more time to figure out, didn't get a full spring practice. It struggled in the second half of the season, especially. Is it as simple as that? All right, let's look this almost as an exhibition and put it in the rearview mirror and move on? I mean, is that a realistic thing? And if so, what do you have to do to get things moving in the right direction if you're Jeff Brom?
Well, I think we've heard the great Brian Neubert say many times, yes, this is a strange year, but results do matter, right? And I know the circumstances for everybody were very trying. They were one of a kind for this generation, obviously trying to dodge the COVID-19 bullet throughout the entire year. It was exhausting, getting tested every day. A lot was asked of staffers, of players, and everybody went through it though, guys. And some teams figured it out, right, and still succeeded, while others struggled for one reason or another. I think Purdue's issues are numerous at this point. For me, Brian talked about some of the intangibles, things like toughness and being able to handle adversity. Sometimes that gets back to your leadership as well, your internal leadership from your players, not your coaches. You guys have heard coaches say over and over, I have, that the best teams, you really don't have to lead because they lead themselves because of their strong, players, strong senior classes, whatnot. So they've got to look inside for that type of resilience and leadership. And then, of course, on the field, guys, we could talk for probably an hour here, specifically about the defense and special teams, the problems there that have been sort of persistent, especially during this 4-game losing streak. Defensively, not getting off the field on third down, can't get a takeaway, can't get a pass rush or a sack. The special teams malfunctions, again, are just brutal. You can't sugarcoat it. And then offensively, guys, we talked to Jeff Brom numerous times about how an off-season priority was to improve the ground game. They brought in Neil Callaway as a senior analyst, former UAB head coach, played for Bear Bryant, coached at all these great schools, is going to presumably help with the ground game. I know he's a great coach, but the long story short, guys, Purdue's 14th in the Big Ten in rushing, just like they were last year. So, again, Brian said this too. Purdue doesn't have to average 300 yards rushing a game, but you have to get enough in that ground game to keep defenses honest, and that hasn't been the case. And you need some semblance of balance. I know the offense isn't the biggest issue this team has, but to me, there's still a long to-do list whenever this offseason does start.
It's interesting because the Iowa game, Brian, Purdue beat them by running the football down the stretch, and Xander Horvath, et cetera, and controlling the football in the fourth quarter. Iowa's turned into an excellent football team, as we might have thought it could have been, but, it's had a very good season this year and likely will play Indiana if all the crossovers happen as we might expect next week. And if Indiana can play, those are all things. But, it's just an interesting dynamic, again, trying to get the pieces together where when you start a program in 2017 and 18, and like you said, you had Jacob Thienum and you had David Blau, you had guys that for whatever reason appeared to want to lead and wanted to move it forward. And is it as simple as trying to just find some guys that can gut it out? Because your talent level, at least on offense, in certain places is good, but it's not great. So all those factors play in as you try to reboot this thing, Brian.
Yeah, just going back to that Iowa game, it feels like a year and a half ago now, but that was Purdue. Purdue was the more physical football team against Iowa. Iowa is one of the gold standards in the Big Ten for physical football. Purdue was really good on offense up front, but they were also really physical and really energized on defense. The reason Purdue won that game is because that defense was flying around. They were attacking the football. They were trying to rip the football out. You haven't seen that the last couple of weeks. That speaks to energy. That speaks to effort. That speaks to a defensive coaching staff's connection to their players that speaks to a lot of different things. And I don't know where it all went wrong, but it very clearly did. That was a great win for Purdue that day because they did everything in that game they haven't been able to do since. They responded to adversity. They made a big play in a big moment. They were physical and they were energetic and they looked like they really wanted to win. You know, that's what they've got to get back to whenever this season ends, is they have to harness that hunger that 2017 team had from getting their brains beat in for 4 straight years. You know, I don't know if you just reset it overnight, but, you know, Purdue obviously wasn't very good for the better part of the past 2 years. And if that doesn't sting these players to the point where they want to get back and they want to, you know, change things, then you might have the wrong players, or you might just have players who have tuned out the coaching staff, or they're only worried about themselves and not their team. None of those things are positive. So Purdue, that's what I mean when Purdue needs a cultural reboot here as soon as this season comes to a conclusion.
Well, you know, and Jeff Brom certainly, and again, it's easier, or it's more evident when you have those fire and brimstone pep talks on the video board in 17 and 18, and Purdue does some great things in each of those seasons, beating Iowa on the road in 17, beating Ohio State in 18. There was some magic there. You know, you got to believe the coaching staff does the same thing. They've got to find not the fire, but to find that magic thing that makes this program move forward, Tom. And you know, it's been missing only in results. I can't speak to what's going. We don't know what's going on in the day-to-day on the practice field because we're not seeing it. But it seems to me that's another energy level that's got to be at full tilt if this program's going to move forward.
Yeah. I guess to that point, what was disturbing in that last game were the number of penalties they had too. The sloppiness, the inattention to detail. Now, I know the penalties haven't been an issue for most of the year, but, you know, guys, down the stretch here, these last 3 games, it was like the game of the year, the critical game of the year. Each subsequent week, they still failed to deliver, guys. They were favored at Minnesota. They were favored against Rutgers. They were favored against Nebraska. Everybody knew there was a sense of urgency. Everybody felt Purdue had the better team going into that game day. And on all 3 occasions, guys, save for that Northwestern game at home, on all 3 occasions, Purdue lost to a team that at least, you know, odds makers thought was inferior. And then Purdue, again, had that sense of urgency to try to get their season back on track. And to see it sort of self-destruct like it did against Nebraska on senior day too, right? The last time for presumably guys like Derek Barnes and Grant Hermans and Brennan Thieneman and those guys to leave the field for one last time like that has to be disappointing. So, yeah, you know, if your message gets stale, you got to change your message. You got to change your methods too. That's what people are paid a lot of money to do, to figure these things out. And you always have to be evolving as a person, whatever you're doing in life, and that's the challenge. You guys have heard that phrase. You're never staying the same. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. And you got to look in the mirror. And you can't point fingers. And it's a cold, hard reality sometimes. You got to face as a person. And you know, this could be a cold winter in West Lafayette because 2021 shapes up as a very critical year to I think, the trajectory of the Jeff Brom era.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's hard. It's almost impossible to debate, and that's whether that's players, coaches on down the line. That's going to be, it's going to be a time to figure that stuff out. Certainly, Purdue on the recruiting side, National Signing Day is coming up. Is it? I'm losing. Is it the 16th?
Yes.
But Brian and obviously Purdue got some disappointing news this week with the quarterback Sam Jackson moving or decommitting and apparently picking.
Well, I don't know. I mean, technically, I don't know if he has yet. He's just we basically reported he's not going to be part of the class, and that's there's no formal report on that yet. But I'm telling you, I've told people at least that we've confirmed that he's not expected to be.
Yeah.
So whatever you want to call it, he's not going to be part of the class.
But tell me about, obviously we're still waiting on Yanni Karloftis and this, trying to bring an end to this class. I guess anything can be in the world of last minute changes, and anything can happen here in the last week. But what do you expect here as we ride this out towards the very end?
Well, I don't expect very much to happen. Purdue's got a couple more guys lined up Obviously, they're waiting on Yanni Karloftis, waiting on a offensive tackle who I was hoping I wouldn't have to say his name on any sort of broadcast platform because I haven't asked him how to pronounce it yet. Marcus Bow,
Yeah.
something like that.
Nimbo.
I'm pretty sure I'm fairly certain he's already committed, just waiting to announce. But obviously, Purdue's waiting on Karloftis. Other than that, I'm not all that sure there's a whole lot left to do because Purdue's got a really small class. They're going to hit the transfer wire again very hard. But, Purdue's got its hands full here again because, your momentum as a program has dipped here because you didn't have a great season last year for a lot of reasons. And now you've what's happened the past month to Purdue football has happened. I don't know of any real red flags in terms of guys who are still committed in terms of them going somewhere else. But if that's ever going to happen, this year is the year for that to happen because all of these guys committed to Purdue without visiting, with some exceptions, obviously. Some of them visited before they committed. But I don't anticipate Purdue having to do a whole lot more. I don't know if they replace Sam Jackson with a quarterback. If you do, I don't know who the hell you're going to get at this point. But the thing about the Sam Jackson deal is it just blew up in Purdue's face because coaches get paid a lot of money to make a lot of very hard decisions, and those decisions can always go one of two ways on you. And Purdue took Sam Jackson back in June or whatever it was, before Donovan McCulley, who is one of the highest regarded quarterbacks in the country, let alone the state. I thought he was leaning to Purdue. I thought Purdue would have gotten him. Purdue takes Sam Jackson because they like him, even after Sam Jackson had committed twice to Minnesota and decommitted both times. Twice. He's 5 foot. Setting aside the football part of it, where you have a 5'11" quarterback in a drop back passing pro style offense, that part Purdue must have been comfortable with. But Purdue preempted Donovan McCulley by taking this guy, despite the fact he'd already committed twice to the same school and decommitted. As soon as he committed, I had people in Chicago telling me the kid was a flake. This blew up on Purdue because if they had gotten Donovan McCulley, that would have been a big part of this class. It might have helped them with some other in-state guys. The other part of it too is, of course, Sam Jackson commits to Purdue. The next day, Donovan McCulley commits to Indiana because the Purdue thing dried up on him. Just totally blew up in your face. And it's unfortunate for Purdue, but it's kind of the nature of recruiting where sometimes you have to make a hard decision like that. You do, and then you're made to look bad for it. It happens. I mean, everybody will second guess Jeff Brom. I would second guess Jeff Brom, but it happens. It just does. You have to make hard decisions, and oftentimes they go the wrong way on you. And that's exactly what happened with Purdue last summer.
Yeah, very tough move there from that standpoint. Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We will bring in Kyle Nedenreed from the Indianapolis Star, talk some basketball. Then Tom Dienhart will join us at third segment with Zach Osterman. So we'll look forward to that, talk a little bit more Purdue, Indiana, the game that might have been, kind of a little bit about where Indiana football is as well, and the roadmap for both Purdue and Indiana upcoming. So we'll look forward to doing that. We'll take a 2-minute break, and we'll be back with Kyle and Brian, and look forward to segment 2 of Gold and Black Live.